Okay, here we are. This is video lesson number 3. It corresponds with chapter 6 in your manual concerning schedule and dispatch management. To start off with, I'll give you a small apology for the length of the previous lesson, which concerned call management, as you recall. That just happens to be a huge topic that ties in with so many other things that it necessarily took quite a bit of time to get through it. I can give you the promise and consolation this lesson will be quite a bit faster. In fact, all the lessons from here on out will be quicker and not quite so laborious as was the previous lesson. While doing apologies, I'll do another quick one, and that is to apologize for the fact that this whole series is actually in its first edition stage, and it's less professional and less perfect than I hope to eventually make it. I've had to produce this series basically as a beginner in this kind of thing, and I hope it's very informative for you, but I realize it's not all that perfect, and later on certainly we'll hope to have a better series available. Of course, by that time, if you're using this one, you won't need the better series, but I guess I'm just explaining that anyway. Anyway, as I mentioned, this lesson concerns schedule and dispatch management. And what I want to do first of all is explain to you that there are two primary forms that we use to address schedule and dispatch management. The first is the dispatch map, accessed by pressing F5, or you can actually click right here, which is the position that corresponds with F5. Here's our dispatch map. The second of the two forms, I'll escape back here, is what we call the schedule list form. You see we've kind of abbreviated schedule list here, and that's F6, and that's this little form right here. Now you might wonder, what is the difference between the dispatch map and the schedule list form? One thing I want you to understand is the schedule list and the dispatch map. Here, we'll bring the dispatch map back, schedule list back. Actually, I think we could display the schedule list over the dispatch map. There we go. They both of these forms draw on and display exactly the same information. In fact, there is a file that the system keeps on your hard drive, which is called the schedule list file. Here in the schedule list form, if you look at this text, you're basically reading text directly out of that schedule list file. I can use the page up and page down keys to view through multiple pages of such text. If you're a big firm, you might notice it says here page 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3, and so on. You may have 15 pages of pending appointments at any time. If you're a small firm, you may seldom fill a full page. At any rate, we have the different fields. We've got, of course, just a number here for the item, invoice number, name, telephone number. Actually, just very recently, I added an option. Actually, it's the option right here, show tech list. No, actually this one right here. Show zip code for telephone number. And in that context, in telling you that just recently we added an option, I want to explain that this video, even though I plan to replace it with a better done one eventually, is no doubt going to become dated. Two things I want you to be cognizant of in regard to this video series. One is, I'm only showing you just the highlights of the features. There will be tons and tons of features, tons of tools, tons of capabilities, tons of shortcuts that will not be shown in this series. The breadth and depth of capabilities in Service Desk is just too much for any reasonable tutorial to be able to show you everything. You still need to read the applicable chapters in the manual to learn what the real details are. That's one little caveat. The second caveat is that we're always adding things. We're always improving and changing things. So there will be, possibly by the time you're viewing this video, there will be significant added features beyond what's presently shown. I just brought that up because it's contextually relevant to the fact that I mentioned I just added a feature where if, as a user, you prefer to see zip codes in this column here rather than telephone numbers, if those zip codes seem more useful to you, you could select a little option right here which would cause that to happen. Anyway, then we have a column for city initials, we have a column for the actual appointment reference, a column for the initials of the technician that's assigned, and then one for the D or T to indicate whether the assignment was definite or tentative, and one for the grid code coordinates for the map book. D or T for definite or tentative, perhaps I should explain that. I'm not sure if I did it all in Chapter 2, I may have done, but what it refers to is Sometimes you know that a particular technician needs to do a particular job. Maybe it's his recall, maybe he's returning to install a part that he diagnosed. You know it's more efficient for the same technician to go back, or whatever the case is. Maybe the customer requested that technician. You'd put it in indefinite status if that was the case, if that needs to be the technician that's assigned to the job. Otherwise, you'd leave it in tentative status for a T, which means of course, that it could be reassigned to a different technician if it happened to fit the routing better. Okay, let me return briefly here to the point that these two different forms draw on exactly the same data file. Again, here in the dispatch map, you see the data in more or less a pure data format. And the reason we have the schedule list form is because there's a number of things you want to do with the data sometimes in a pure data format, and that's really the purpose of the schedule list form, is any of the kinds of manipulation that you need to have really direct access for. And again, it just displays it in these basic simple lines of text. The dispatch map, on the other hand, while going to that exact same schedule list file to acquire and display its data, displays it to you in a much more of a graphic context. In particular, the dispatch map is set up to show you each and every job in its correct location wherever it happens to fit within your territory. For instance, this person right here, this is their actual location where they happen to fit in the territory. And this person here. We call each of these little rectangular references that reference an appointment. We've got one here between 12 and 2 for the Palmers, one down here for the Fletchers between 1 and 4, one here between 2 and 5 for the Neelys, etc. These little references in the little tiny rectangle we refer to as the graphic reference for the job, because it shows graphically where the job is at in respect to your territory. Now this particular layout on this day is a little bit of a jumble. Let's look at the next days. Okay, we're looking at Fridays now. We only have a few jobs scheduled for Fridays so far. It's a bit less of a jumble, so it's easier to show you. Anyway, the main point is that you can see graphically where each of your jobs are located, and that makes it much easier to do your planning in terms of which tech is going to go when, and when you're adding jobs, to plan when it makes sense to add them that will make it most efficient in terms of your routing. So on the dispatch map, we show each job in its graphic location with this little tiny rectangular reference. The jobs are also shown in a second context in the dispatch map, and that is in a list format underneath the technician's name. And here, because there's more space, we can show a little bit more information. We include the telephone number, or optionally the zip, of course, if you selected that option, initials for the city, and a little time reference. Anyway, the point is that each job is located on your dispatch map in the two different contexts, as the graphic reference with the little tiny rectangle in its correct location in terms of your dispatch map graphics, and in list format under the name of the tech that it happens to currently be assigned to. Now in terms of these tech lists, which you see here, 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 and here, and so on for different technicians, let's go back to an earlier day. We'll see more jobs assigned under each tech's name. You'll notice that as laid out for my own former service territory, I've kind of got each tech's list in a different area, sort of scattered around the periphery of the graphic drawing for the territory. Chances are your layout's probably going to be different than that. As time's gone by, I've tended to gravitate toward a philosophy of putting each of these lists together where they're all viewable on the same page simultaneously, and more of a kind of grid type arrangement. There's kind of pros and cons in going one direction versus the other, and more often than not, for most of the systems I've set up, I've tended to judge as the years have gone by that it's better to do it the other way rather than the way that you see here. There are some commands. If your tech lists are segregated off in a space like that, you can hit the end button on your keyboard and you'll instantly be transported to that location. You can hit the home key on the other hand and go instantly to the home location, which will have your territory somewhere near the center. As a matter of fact, that kind of leads us into the next area that I want to go to. But before going to that area, let me just summarize the main point that we've tried to make here at the beginning, which is there are two different forms, both of which draw from the same underlying data file. There's your schedule list form, which presents the data to you in a purely textual format in a big master list like this. And there is the dispatch map itself, which presents the data in two modes. One is very, very graphic, and the other is, again, more of a list format, but it's a list under each text name, and it may be arranged somewhat differently than this, but at any rate, those are the two different forms, both of which, again, draw from and manipulate data in exactly the same underlying data file, which we call the schedule list file. With that generality out of the way, let's now focus specifically on the dispatch map and show you some of the features and some of the tools and so on, some of the actions you can do within this form. First of all, of course, there's the general background, which is just a sketch of your territory. We put in various details. Here we have a coastline, for example, some mountains, some interstates. These are land boundaries here and so on. Of course, you use the cursor keys, some people call them arrow keys, to move up and down or left and right on your map. This particular map has no left and right. My territory was pretty much vertical, so it was arranged such that we didn't need any left and right. We just have up and down. In fact, it's not even a whole lot of that. You might notice this little thing right up here. This is what we call the map inset. There's a little red rectangle here, and that red rectangle represents the area that is currently displayed out of the whole map. This little inset, I think, is often useful, particularly if we've drawn your map at a large scale. It might help you orient yourself to realize that part that you're presently viewing. I think that's good for initiation. My personal taste is, after you got a good feel for that, I like to get rid of it. We have range lines here. We have mileage estimates. These mileage estimates are basically here so as to help your dispatchers kind of score themselves and how well they're doing on dispatching efficiently. And so we got individual ones for each technician, and then we have a system-wide total up here. If they're doing, if this average miles per job figure is low, that means they're doing a pretty good job of dispatching efficiently. If it's high, that means they're doing less well. And they can kind of score themselves that way and maybe get some incentive to try to make the routing more efficient. Now, several of these features can be turned on or off. For example, I mentioned I don't particularly, once the orientation has sort of been achieved like this inset, I think it kind of gets in the way a little bit. We'll just go to the settings form here, Control F1, drag that over here, and I'll turn off that feature right here as a local setting, Show Minimap Inset and Dispatch Map. Turn that off. I'm going to leave those other two features on, the range lines and the mileage estimates. I'll save the values, and now as we come here, you'll see that little map inset is gone. Small. Okay, I've shown you how we can use cursor keys to move up and down, left or right, if left or right is applicable in your dispatch map. You can also hold down your space bar, and you can look at a broad overview of your territory. Sometimes that's very handy. Obviously, we can't display quite the same detail when it's all reduced like this, but sometimes it's nice just to see a broad overview of your territory. Here, I'll page down, broad overview of Fridays, and so on. Now, as I mentioned various days, let me just explain. We have the day up here that we're viewing displayed, of course. It shows us the quantity of jobs scheduled for that day. And to switch from one day to another, I just use the page down or page up keys on my keyboard. Page down, of course, goes to the next day. Page up goes to the day preceding. In fact, I can go to yesterday here. You'll notice the background changes color to indicate I'm looking at a day in the past and then the day before and so on. I can go as far back as I want, or I can go as far into the future as I want. Let's suppose, however, I want to look at a day, 5 weeks in the future or whatever. I'd have to page down a whole bunch of times to get that far into the future, and that's a little bit awkward. Instead, I can simply press C on my keyboard, and up comes this little calendar. And let's say I'm interested in June 7th. Here we go with June 7th. We're now looking at that day. I'll go back here to the present because really I don't want to look at June 7th. We'll go back to today. And that's what we're looking at. At this point in time, I've already mentioned a few different commands, page up and page down for different days. Hold down the space bar to see the broad overview. I mentioned the end key to move instantly to your tech list area if that's in fact kind of segregated and off in a place by itself, or the home key to move instantly to kind of the center area where your headquarters location is, in the center there with that kind of a dot in the center. There's a whole lot of commands here on the dispatch map for various actions that you can do. I mean, there's a lot of them. And you might wonder why we don't have a command bar, say up here on the top, that you can easily access each of those actions with a mouse click, or that would maybe remind you right there on the top what a keyboard command would be. There's a reason we don't have it, and that's because we need all the space, for crying out loud, for the graphics that we're displaying. This is really an intensive graphics area, and the more space we can have for this purpose, the better. In fact, if we could have, say, a 25-inch screen or a 30-inch screen that showed your whole territory in one view, so you didn't have to use cursor keys, seeing a smaller percentage of it, that would be even better. But of course, we don't have screens typically that are quite that big, and we have to do with what we have. If we took up some of the space to, say, have a command bar here up on the top, we'd have less space, and it's simply the fact that for what we're wanting to do here, even though there'd be a benefit in having a command bar up there, the cost in terms of loss of space wouldn't be worth it. So what we do instead is we have all of our actions available, as you'll soon see, by various keyboard things. We've already shown you a couple, or by lots of different mouse actions, and you simply have to learn what those are. We have taken a step to try to make it easier to learn what they are. For one thing, of course, they're in the manual. For another thing, I'll be reviewing a number of them here in the tutorial. And when you know there's a command, you need to remind yourself what it is. You'll need to just go back to what we already showed you in the previous lesson, and that's the command summary right here. Click on the command summary, and again, there's various categories. In particular, there's this one right here under dispatch map controls. And you'll see we have several different categories under dispatch map controls of the different things you can do. I mentioned pressing C to bring up the calendar. That's right down here under Other on Map Calendar. Right click on Item Locate Flag, which we'll look at in a few minutes, or press C. Lots of different things. When you need to remind yourself or just review what the different capabilities are in the dispatch map, go to the command summary, dispatch map controls, and you'll see the nice summary right here. That's basically the easiest and fastest method to remind yourself of what they are. Or actually, it's not. I wanted you to see this command summary in this context here, but in fact, when you're in the dispatch map, there's a much easier way to access that particular element, and that is simply by right-clicking in any empty place on the dispatch map, and when you do so, precisely that same command summary will come down for you into the dispatch map, so you can see the summary of the different commands right here in the exact context where you need them, instead of needing to go escape out of the dispatch map and then come over here and do it this way. It's just much easier and handier to right click here, and this same right click function that's contextual to show you the command summary that fits the environment that you're in is available in a number of other contexts as well. Please remember, you're in the dispatch map. You want to know how to do some particular action that you have a notion can be done, but you can't remember the exact keyboard or mouse sequence that does it. Simply right click and you'll see the list of possibilities come up here, and then you'll know what it is that you need to do. Okay, now that I've shown you that, I want to proceed now and show you a number of the other tools that are available in the dispatch map. The first tool I want to show you in this regard concerns the task of assigning or reassigning a job from one technician to another. We could start on this page, which is for Wednesday, but you'll notice that all the jobs have check marks, basically, or something other, next to them in the list sections, and that indicates the jobs that have actually been dispatched already to the technicians involved. And if we tried to reassign one of those, it would warn us that with it already been dispatched, that could make some complications that we need to deal with. So let's just page down and we'll look at tomorrow's schedule, where the jobs, for the most part, still have not been dispatched, and we can more freely show you the assigning methodologies here. There's basically two methods. Let's suppose, first of all, that you're looking at the graphic reference for a job that you want to assign to a particular tech or reassign to a different one. All you really have to do is just click down on the reference, and then you can rotate to whichever technician you want to reassign it to, like so, and it will pop out of the list of the technician it was assigned to. It had been in this guy's list, you may recall, and into the list of the technician you reassigned it to. Of course, it changes the color to indicate the technician that it's been reassigned to also. That's one method you can use. Another method, let's suppose we want to take it back from this guy's route to this one. We can just grab it in the list section and we can drag it like so. Basically that easy. That's all you have to do to assign jobs around. Let's suppose this one right here I want to put in this guy's route. Not a problem. Just reassign them like so. Very, very easy. Now let me point out a little detail to you here about the way these jobs are displayed. If you look at the graphic references, you'll find that some of them are entirely in the color of the tech they're assigned to. Again, obviously each color has a tech. See here, both these lines are in the black color, both these lines are in the black color. But look over here, this one, the name of the customer is in black, but the time frame is in red. And similarly here, and then here we have all black. There's a reason for this. Actually, let me first point out, though, the same thing holds true here in the list representation. Some of them, the whole line will be in the text color. In others, the city name will be in this dark red color, so that the whole line isn't consistently in that text color. The reason we do this is simply to give you a visual tip-off of whether the job assignment is definitely for the tech. In other words, it's one that he has to do certainly, versus if it's one that could be reassigned. It's just the easiest way we can give you that visual tip-off. If a portion of the reference for the appointment is not in the text color, if it's in this dark red color, that indicates it's a tentative assignment and it could be reassigned to someone else. If the entirety of the reference is in the technician's color, like here and here, that's an indication that its status is definite and you definitely need to send it to that technician, unless maybe you got extremely strong reasons otherwise. Anyway, let's just to show you what happens, try reassigning this job right here, and you'll see we get a little warning telling us that in fact it's indefinite status, and do we really want to reassign it? We could say yes, it will let us override that, but at least it gives us the warning to warn us that there was some reason why we put it into definite status and may want to keep it that way. So, assigning, reassigning jobs is a very simple task. Just to show you a little tie-in here, so you can see how the data that I've referred to that underlies all this is one data set, whether it's here in the dispatch map or in the F6 schedule list form. I want to show you something. I earlier showed you here that we have the technician's initials that the job's assigned to here in textual format, and of course back here in the dispatch map we see it simply in the text color and in the list format under his name. Let's suppose that I wanted to reassign this Fox job right here, and that I didn't know how to do it by either clicking on it like so, or, here, put it back into Dave's schedule, or by dragging it like I showed you. There'd be another method by which we could do it. We could simply bring up the schedule list form here, find Fox within the list. Let's see, we'll have to go down to Thursday here. Here's Fox. I could come over here and I could simply click on the line, which encloses it in editing boxes, and I could reassign that to, let's put it to me, my initials are GR. And we'll leave it in tentative status. I'll hit enter to save that line. We come back here to the dispatch map, and lo and behold, it's switched into my schedule because in fact I changed the initials back here to my initials rather than Jim's as they had been. Actually, I'm going to put this back into Jim's schedule because that's, no, I think I had it in Dave's schedule. Excuse me, I'm getting myself confused because that's where we wanted it to be. But I just wanted to show you the tie-in there. It's the same data set. When we came here and we changed the initials assigned, it changed it back here in the dispatch map as well, and vice versa. If I changed it here and we went to the schedule list, we'd see that the system had changed the initials here for us. The thing I'm trying to emphasize is it's this data, it's this underlying data, and whether it's this form, the F6 schedule list form, or this form, the dispatch map, it's that same data set that's being accessed. We just display it differently. To further illustrate that point, and I know I'm kind of belaboring this, but a lot of people have a hard time getting this. Let's suppose I wanted to change the definite/tentative status of this job, which is presently tentative, you can see because it's not 100% in the text color, to definite status instead. Now right now, this job, I'm actually going to do a little trick here. It's a shift right click on the reference, and this puts me right into the schedule list format for the job. You can see it's in T for tentative status. I'll escape back out again here. And let's suppose I want to switch it from the dispatch map into definite status instead. The command for that is simply a right click on the graphic reference, and you can see as I did that, it made the whole thing in the text color, which means it's definite status. I can actually click repeatedly and go back and forth here. But if I leave it in this status, and I'll do another shift right click here to link to the schedule list form, you can see it turned that into a D. It's that, again, it's that one data set that we're dealing with. It's just two different ways to manipulate it. Here I'll change it back to a T, and I'll save it. Now, oops, didn't mean to escape out of there. I'll come back to my dispatch map, and you'll see that it's back in tentative status just because that's how I changed it. I'm just trying to emphasize it's the two different forms, but it's the same data. You can work with the data textually here, or you can work with it in more of a graphic environment here, but you're working with that same underlying file. The one file only that concerns what you see and work with in both forms. Okay, the next thing I want to show you here is how we can check off when we've dispatched jobs to a technician. There's several different ways you can achieve a dispatch. For the moment here, I'll assume that your method is you've got the tickets printed up, tickets/invoices, whichever you call them, and the technicians come in and they pick up their stack of tickets in the morning. You can see a check mark here. Again, I indicated a check mark is the symbol to show the jobs have been dispatched. Let's suppose this guy comes in 8:30 in the morning, and we give him the 6 jobs that are presently scheduled for him. What I'm going to do is I'm simply going to go shift click, and you can see the check mark appears, which indicates the job's been dispatched. Shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click. Now I've got check marks here, and that's the indication that in fact each of these jobs have been dispatched to the technician. This serves a number of purposes. For one, it helps you keep track of what you've dispatched and what you haven't. For another, another reason, if somebody else in the office wants to know, they can simply hit F5 and look at the dispatch map and see what's been dispatched and what hasn't. By the way, I'm using the word dispatched here, and maybe I should define what I mean. What I mean by dispatched is that the job information has actually been given to the technician in some manner or another so that he knows the job's assigned to him. He's got the information that he needs, whether it's a written invoice or whatever the case is, to go and do the job. In other words, it's been handed off to him. It's no longer the office responsibility in the sense that the office is managing it. It's his responsibility in the sense you've given him the information and it's his duty to carry it out. It may have happened just by virtue of a phone call or a radio dispatch. Whatever the method, you've given him the information and you've checked off basically here on the dispatch map that you've done so. Other purpose this serves is it makes an entry in the job history for you. Now, a moment ago I showed you I could do a shift right click on a job reference and link directly to the textual entry for that appointment in the dispatch map. Another little link I can do here, I can do a control right click and I can go directly to the job record that pertains to that appointment. Now, a moment ago I checked it off as having been dispatched, and now we're looking at the actual job record that pertains to that appointment. And if you look over here in the history, when I did that checkoff action, it made an entry here in the history with the date and time and my initials showing that at this date and time I dispatched it to the technician. Those are his initials, BH. In fact, it did it for all of these jobs that we checked off at the same time. With that one action, it automatically made that historical entry for us. So we maintain the history of the job at the same time. I'll just hit escape to get out of the job record form, and I'm back in my dispatch map. And with a glance here I can see which jobs have been dispatched, which ones are still awaiting dispatch, and so on. When this technician comes in, hopefully I'll have some more jobs for him by then. Anyway, when he comes in and I give him his set of jobs, I'll check those off as having been dispatched and so on. This is one we already dispatched, obviously, perhaps the evening or day before to this technician, but the others haven't been dispatched to him. So again, you can see it gives us that kind of information that we really need to have. Now let's suppose that for one reason or another we want to resequence some jobs. Maybe we don't like the order that they're in. Well, that's pretty easy in general. You can simply, like, say we want this job to be after this one. The fact is, these are both at the same residence. One was an American Home Shield, and the other was COD for the same person. But at any rate, I'll just show you we can just drag like this, and the jobs automatically get resequenced for us. I could show you resequencing between another set of jobs like this, but the fact is, the system is going to put those back in their normal sequence for us. In fact, I'll just do this little thing, and you can see it goes back because the system has what's called an auto sort feature, where it automatically sorts jobs according to their natural time sequence, unless we do one or more things to disable that. Usually, for most operations, to have jobs automatically sorted in their time sequence is a benefit. Once in a while, you may not want it done so, or perhaps you've got an operation that's different than most where you never want it done so. We have options to deal with both of those things. I won't explain them now. They're in the manual, and we'll just skip over that because that's maybe more technical than we want to get into right here. Anyway, that's a basic summary about resequencing. Okay, so we've done assigning, resequencing, checking off as having been dispatched. Let's show you another kind of checking off. Let's suppose you like to keep track of where your technicians have been to during the day. Suppose you have them calling in as they finish each job to indicate they've finished, and you want to keep track of that here in your software system. Well, that's very easy. Let's suppose Bruce Hayward has called in to say he's finishing up the power/Nagel job. By the way, if it's not obvious to you, power/Nagel here, we'll do a quick link to the job record that pertains to this. You'll see this is a landlord-tenant job. We know it's landlord-tenant because it's a private party here and it's a private party here. This is the bill to, obviously. This is the go-to or location. And if it's a private party and a private party, it stands to reason it's a landlord-tenant or something at least analogous to that. Anyway, the system notes when there's two different names like this and sort of makes a combination to display for us in the dispatch map. So this job can be referred to as a power/Nagel job. That's essentially what we mean in that kind of context. Anyway, I'll escape back out of there. Anyway, again, suppose Bruce Hayward calls in here and he reports having finished at this job and we want to check it off. We'll simply do a control click, and you can see that the symbol here has turned to a down arrow. That symbolizes that he's been there. And we now have an X through the graphic reference, which symbolizes in that location that he's been there. And by virtue of that, we can see on the dispatch map where the technician has been. He calls in from the next job, and we do the same thing here, and so on. And thus, with a glance, anybody in the office can see that this guy's been to these two jobs, but he's still has to fulfill these 4 appointments, and so on, which makes it very effective. There are other types of checking off you can do. I'll leave it to you to read in the manual about those details. At this point, I'll try to just hurry down through my list of some of what the other things are. Let's see, I already showed you the general overview by holding down your space bar. Another tool, you can simply hit the D button on your keyboard, and up comes this little display. We call this the density graph. It shows basically your density of appointments throughout the various hours of the day. It's handy to see how heavily loaded you are in a simple glance without having to look at all the text different routes. You see the numbers here. The numbers show how many appointments are pending during any particular hour. So like during the hour of 9:30 here, we have almost 4 appointments pending. We have 4, 5, 6 technicians depending in this particular operation, so you can see we're not as heavily loaded here as we really need to be, especially throughout most of the day. If we look here at yesterday, we've got more of the day up close to the level of 4. If you had 10 technicians, you'd want to be up probably dang close to the level of 10 throughout most of the day, and so on. At any rate, it makes it easy with a basic glance as you go through different days to see what your appointment density is. When you want to get rid of that display, you can simply hit D again, or you can hit escape on your keyboard. Another little tool, let's go back to Thursday here that we were looking at. Let's suppose that, such as is the case here, you've got quite a few route lines for your different technicians crisscrossing one over the other, and it's a little difficult to distinguish one tech's route from the next tech's route, you can simply right-click on the name of a tech whose route you're particularly or at the moment interested in, and basically it removes the route lines from the other tech's jobs and leaves simply the route lines for the tech that you're interested in. It also turns the background to a very light gray to further indicate to you that you're in this kind of special mode here. And you can still page up, you can still go through various days, and you're going to continue to only see the route lines for that particular technician. As in everything else, when you want to get out of that mode, you simply hit escape to do so. And as you do so, you're back into the regular display mode, showing route lines for all of the techs. I've shown you that if you're interested in seeing the particular job record that pertains with any of these appointments, you can do a control right click on the graphic reference and you'll see that job record, or it works just the same if you do a control right click on the list reference. Now that's not always the case. Some actions are particular to the list, some are particular to the graphic reference, but most of these links, quick links we call them, to a different context can work in either location. If I want a quick link to the appointment reference in the schedule list context, on the other hand, I do a shift right click and it puts the appointment in editing boxes for me and it's ready to change. In fact, I could right here type in a different appointment. If I wanted to change it to a different day, that'd be one possible day or a different time of changing the appointment. As it is, though, I'll simply hit escape and escape out of there and go back to my dispatch map. I'll just briefly show you one more major tool here. I'm going to hit Z, and this brings up what we call the zone scheduler. The zone scheduler shows you what your appointment density is, or what your appointment quantity is in a graphical format compared to how much you've allocated, if in fact you've decided to divide your territory up into various zones. This is a feature that the majority of our clients will not use. It's particularly suited if either you're a very large operation, I'd say 15 trucks and up, or if you do work for Whirlpool and therefore are receiving dispatches through Service Bench. Service Bench needs to have coordination with zones and needs to be able to know what your zone vacancies are. This gives you the capacity to do that very well, and in fact we will in the near future have an automatic interface with Service Bench via which the two systems will link and they'll know what your zone availability is based on the data that's kept for you here. If you are in the category where you want to use this, there's a section in the manual that describes it in detail. Again, a simple escape to get out of that and back into my dispatch map. Several minutes ago I talked about various dispatch methods, whether you call or radio your jobs to a technician or give them the written work ticket / invoice. Whatever method you use, Service Desk is happy to adapt. In fact, right here on the dispatch map there are dispatch tools available to you that are quite powerful. In particular, let's look again at Thursday's schedule. Let's suppose that Jim Dillon is a person that we send him his jobs by fax. He doesn't normally come into the office. I could simply click on his name and up comes this little option box here and it asks us what we wish to do. We can print a list of the text jobs. We can copy a list into the Windows clipboard. Now I think I mentioned before what the clipboard is. This might be useful, for example, if we had a alphanumeric paging software or email. Maybe we wanted to email us stuff. It would basically put the dispatch information into the Windows clipboard. We could go to the email and we could hit Control V, which would insert those clipboard contents that have all the dispatch information pertaining to the jobs into the email, and then we could just send it to Jim Dillon here. We can print a full job information for fax or other use. In fact, we could use the computer's internal fax for that purpose. Or we can copy full job information into a file for automated alphanumeric paging. Basically, this will interface it with your alphanumeric paging software and send the full job information that's needed to the technician through his alphanumeric pager. Or we can print a set of actual invoices for the technician. So there's several options here, all of which are designed to help you facilitate your dispatch. Now, if you, in regard to this last option, if your office works like mine did, and like I think most do, you print up the tickets / invoices at the same time you create the job record. and there'd be no need to redo it at this point. But there are companies that like to wait until they're actually dispatching the job and then print the tickets, and if so, you could select this option here. At any rate, the point is we have a variety of methods here that are designed to help make the dispatch process for you as easy and obvious as it can be, to basically facilitate it for you. And they're accessed for a tech's entire roster by simply clicking on his name. Now, in contrast, let's suppose that you'd already dispatched most of these jobs to him, and you just wanted to dispatch one. Maybe you haven't, but dispatch the others, but you still just want to dispatch one. You could in that event do a Control-Alt right-click on the particular list item that you wanted to dispatch, and again it brings up an option box for the various ways that you can transmit the information regarding that job to the technician involved. Now, the fact is we build in conveniences galore. Let's suppose, for example, that at a particular point in time this job and this job have already been dispatched to the technician, and you click on his name to dispatch the rest. Actually, let's escape out of the map so that we know that's appropriately saved. We'll come back to it, page down here, and we click on it, and I guess it happens after the fact. At any rate, the point I wanted to get to, it happens after our selection here. That's what was confusing me. Is the system's going to note for us that some of the jobs are already dispatched and some are not, and it's going to ask if we want to redispatch the whole list in spite of the fact that some have been dispatched, versus if we want to only dispatch the ones that remain undispatched. And again, it's just we do everything we can to provide the maximum convenience for you. Okay, we're near wrap up here now on showing you the high points of the dispatch map. Two more things. Let's suppose you want to print an entire list of any particular day's schedule. Simply hit Alt-P on your keyboard, up comes your printer selection box, and you can print that whole list. You can also select Print to File. It will put it in an Excel type format for you, or at least one I should say you can import into Excel, and then you can use the data in any way you want in terms of formatting it in whatever manner you prefer. And one final thing, let's suppose that you're dealing with the map here and you want to dial up one of these customers. Well, you can simply right-click on the line, and your auto dialer, if you have it appropriately set up with a modem in your computer and the modem connected to an appropriate line, will dial the customer for you. Okay, we're almost done with this lesson. That concludes the high points in regard to the dispatch map. Now we're going to want to spend a few moments looking more specifically at the schedule list, and then to finalize, we'll need to spend some time looking at the actual scheduling process as initiated from elsewhere. Okay, here's the schedule list, and you know, as I look at it here, I'm not sure there's so much stuff I need to specifically show you just directly about the form that I haven't already shown you in terms of a basic lesson. Most of the stuff's pretty self-explanatory. I think you can figure it out for the most part. Why don't we, at this point, well, let me just mention one thing. We got an archive button here. Previously we showed you in respect to the call sheets how you can run an archive process here to get rid of the items that are done and complete. Basically back here in the schedule list form, this does the same process. You'll learn later, we'll go over the fact, or you can read in your manual about how there is an auto archive process that automatically overnight invokes all the various archive routines in each of the various contexts in which they're involved, so you really don't have to do them individually, but you can go to each context where such is involved and invoke them on your own if there's ever an occasion to. What really happened is in the evolution of things, each had its own context, and the earlier users had to go to each one periodically and invoke the processes, and then we added the convenience of the auto system, which makes it so you don't have to do that anymore. Maybe I'll explain another little detail here. We have different display options. The schedule list is actually used for a couple purposes. One is to manage the schedule current and prospectively. Another is to keep track of past jobs for a brief period of time to make sure that we make reports regarding what happened on those appointments. We call those post-action reports. Those will be dealt with in a different chapter. But if we wanted to see both the ones that are actually current or prospective plus other ones, we could select the All Items in File category. And there's different shades of gray to indicate various categories. You can read about those in your manual. We could look solely at the ones that are waiting for text report, and so on. We'll go back to the normal display here. There's options here. For example, you might have noticed when we display the dispatch map, it goes immediately to sort of the center area which has your headquarters near the center. Again, I mentioned that these tech list areas on more maps now than not are typically off in their own segregated region, and we have had some clients that wanted to have the initial display go to that tech list area instead of the more graphic center area, and that option that you saw here was designed to allow it to do exactly that. If that was your preference, you check this here. So various options here. Alright, what I want to deal with lastly in terms of scheduling and dispatch is how the appointment references are created in the first place. More specifically, I want to deal with how we initiate appointment records in the first place. The appointment records that you see displayed here and displayed here as well in the two different formats. How do we basically get each of these line items, each of these appointment references, into the list that display here and in the dispatch map? That's the question. As it happens, in the last chapter, the last tutorial, dealing with call sheets, we showed precisely how it's done from a call sheet. I'll just quickly review here. Let's suppose we get a call, oops, we lost our caps there, from Craig Ross. Oops, type it right. And he needs a service call. We've got the references to the past jobs. We could look at each and every one that we've done for him in the past. But anyway, we want to insert the information, and I can just either right-click or hit Enter. It inserts the information. You may recall I have it set up in my office that we don't add the state and the zip. That was our preference. Yours may be otherwise, so you can set it up. So suppose he's calling about his refrigerator. It's a cold spot, and it's not cold enough, and we want to schedule him. We could come over here and use the date picker and the time picker. We could even just type in text if we wished to. But usually the way it's more practical to do it is to do what we call using the item locate feature. The item locate feature means you simply right-click on the address line you're interested in, and it then shows you that location in the dispatch map so you can see it in sort of reference to all the other jobs that you have scheduled for any particular day. Let's page down, look at tomorrow's schedule, maybe the next day's. Well, this day is pretty wide open here. I see I don't have this guy working today. It says unavailable between 9 and 5. Putting these unavailability notes in respect to a text schedule is pretty easy, by the way. You can read about that in your manual. Anyway, Jim Dillon's completely free. I think we ought to offer it to the customer for Jim Dillon. And let's suppose we just offer them between 9 and 12 and they accept it. Or let's suppose that they're not very happy with the 9 to 12 time frame. They want a 2-hour time frame, so we give them 9 to 11. We can just type anything into there that we want. I think I previously mentioned that you can customize this list too to change it any way you want. Anyway, I've typed in 9 to 11. I'll hit Enter, and you'll see it's placed the appointment reference into the call sheet here for me. I think I also previously mentioned that simply because you place a reference into a call sheet, it doesn't in fact place the appointment into the actual schedule list file here, where it has to be, of course, before it will be displayed into the dispatch map here. Basically, we just stuck some text into the call sheet here. You don't get that appointment entry inserted into the actual schedule list for you until you go through the job creation process by clicking on Job Sale here. We're going to give it to Jim Dillon here, so we'll select him. Tentative is good. We'll click OK, and it would normally print the ticket for us. I'll hit Cancel because I really don't want to print the ticket here right now. And we'd have the ticket printing out if we so designated, and it created the job record for us. And most importantly, if we go here to the schedule list, we'll see as we page down here that here's a reference for the invoice number that was created. See 651.95, the invoice number back there, 651.95. The name's Ross, telephone number, city San Juan Capistrano. There's the appointment date, the ticket's assigned to, tentative, and the grid reference. And if we go to the dispatch map and we go to Friday, there's the reference right there for it. Of course, we can do the cross-linking back to the job record, or we can do a cross-linking back to the appointment reference here. Everything's sort of interrelated like that. Anyway, that's one way to create an appointment, to get the appointment reference itself into this all-important schedule list. That's usually the way you create an appointment when it's the initial appointment, the appointment that's made at the time you take the order for the job. That's only one context, though, of course, where you might be creating an appointment. What about when, let's say you took in the service order last week and made the appointment, and the day came for the appointment, you sent the technician out, he fulfilled the appointment, and he ordered a part, you ordered in the part, and the part arrived, and it's now time to schedule for the technician to go back and finish the job. This is really the second context where making appointments comes up. For this context, you go directly to the job record that's involved for the job. Now I just hit F7 to bring up our job record form, and Craig Ross's call sheet was the most recent one, so it came up. More typically, the job record you're looking for probably wouldn't be the most recent one that would come up. But there's several means of locating the job record you're interested in. You can go by invoice number, name, address number, and so on. You can hit page up, page down, page through, etc. At any rate, now that I want to schedule them, there's a few different ways I could do it. I could click on scheduling down here in the potential actions section. And if I did that, in fact, it would lead me directly to the existing appointments, since we have one right now, asking if I wanted to edit it or whatever. And actually, I'll get to that in a minute. But more typically, I'm going to want to use the item locate feature again, which again, I right click here on the address line. It takes me to the dispatch map and shows me his location. And I can go to whatever day I'm interested in and decide when to schedule him for. And same thing, I can left click here, or let's suppose I didn't want to use the mouse. I could actually just hit F1 on my keyboard, and it brings up the same option, little selection box here. Anyway, if I was in fact scheduling in this context, let's suppose I am. Let's suppose it's sometime here next week. Let's say it's Wednesday of next week, and that's when I'm thinking of scheduling him for. I'm going to want to send Jim back naturally, who's completely clean that day. And let's say that 1 to 4 ends up being a good time frame for them. Now, what's happened here, you might ask yourself? Well, what it's done in this context is it's taken us to the schedule list form, and it's basically filled in the majority of a brand new appointment entry for us. It's filled in all the information that it's got. The only thing we're left to do is to assign the technician. I could either select from the list, or I could just simply type in JD, and we're going to make it definite. I just typed in D instead of selecting with my mouse from the list, because it was Jim's job that he diagnosed. We want to send the same guy back. And then to save the record, I'll hit enter. Now, by the way, if I change my mind, I could simply hit escape, and I'd have the option of leaving without going through with the action. But I'm going to hit enter, and there you can see the appointment is now in the dispatch map for Wednesday. And if we go back to the job record, you'll see that it's made a historical notation here for us, noting the fact that at this date and time, I, by my initials, scheduled for 26th Wednesday, 1 to 4 for JD. Another thing you might notice here is the form of the appointment reference. This was the form that I preferred, to just have the day of the month, then the day of the week, and then the time frame. There is an option you can change in the settings form where it will give you a more complete day and month reference, in terms of, like, it would be 4/26 if you prefer that. The system doesn't actually need that complete of a reference. It's just depending on what your preference is. So now, to review the very last part that we just covered, we've shown you basically the methods to create an appointment reference that displays here or in the dispatch map from either a new job as you're creating it from a call sheet, or from an existing job, typically when you're making new appointments after the first appointment, from the job record. Those are the two basic concepts. Now let's show you one last concept in this lesson, and that would concern changing an appointment or deleting it. I actually showed you how you could do that directly from within here. You can left click on a line item to edit it, or if you want to delete it, you can right click on it. But to do it that way, you basically have to find the appointment reference in this list, and that's not always the simplest thing to do. Of course, an alternative would be, and I'm showing you, I don't want to confuse you or make things complicated, I just want you to understand there's everything interrelates. You could come to an appointment reference here and find it in the dispatch map, and then link to the appointment reference here. Let's suppose I wanted to delete that one, and I'd basically gone to it from the quick link from the dispatch map. It's now enclosed in editing boxes, and I can't delete it when it's enclosed in editing boxes, but I can hit escape, which gets rid of the editing boxes. I know where it's at because I identified it that way. Now I could right click on it to delete it. So anyway, there's lots of methods, and I just wanted to show you those are possibilities. But the way it would more typically be done, let's suppose Craig Ross calls in and wants to cancel that particular appointment, and he's not ready to make a new one at the moment. I could simply basically take this option right here. You notice, by the way, that H is underlined. I could either click here, or I could simply hit H on my keyboard. Whoops. No, you know what? I pointed to the wrong one. What am I thinking here? Scheduling. S is underlined. I can hit S on my keyboard, or I can click on the item. If I hit S, it's going to be the same thing as clicking on this item with my mouse. Okay. Anyway, as I do that, this little option box comes up. Basically, it's noted that there is already an appointment there, and it's asking if I want to edit or change that item, if I want to delete it, or if I want to make a new appointment in addition to that one shown. Let's suppose I select deletion, and it's asking me why. Let's suppose the appointment was canceled, and we get a little note here that it's proposing to add to the job's history, and that is beginning with that. I'm going to add here will, I think I want to go in lower cap, call back when ready to reschedule. You know, any kind of notes that you think might be relevant and important. Click on OK. And the appointment is now canceled. It was removed out of here, and therefore also won't display in here because it's not in that underlying file anymore. It was deleted. It was pulled out. And at the same time, the system made an entry here in the job's history for us saying canceled appointment. We'll call back when ready to schedule. Basically, it placed that information in there so we can keep track of what's happened on the job. Okay, I think that is all the major points we really need to cover in regard to scheduling and dispatch in this tutorial. I thank you very much for your time and patience. I thought this would be faster than it was. I kind of promised to be really fast at the beginning, and I think it ended up being a bit longer than I hoped, but I think it's still a lot shorter than that lesson number 2. So we'll look forward to seeing you in lesson number 4. This was 3, concluding now. Thanks very much.